Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Fireside Chat, engaging partners in a coalition to advance your cause. I'm Rebecca Thompson, Director of Network Building at Prosperity Now. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping details for today's Fireside Chat. First of all, yes, this webinar will be recorded and it will be made available to registrants. All webinar attendees are muted to ensure sound quality. You are welcome to ask a question at any time and encouraged to do so by typing your questions into the text box of your GoToWebinar control panel. And as always, if you experience any technical issues, please email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. Now, for today's agenda, we will frame the conversation, and then we'll have a conversation with Teresa Jackson, share some of your questions and answers, and some final thoughts, next step, and close. Our speakers for today are myself, Rebecca Thompson, as well, and we are delighted to have join us Teresa Jackson, who's a program coordinator with Low Country Area VITA Coalition. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you for having me. What a privilege and an honor to be able to do this with you today.
Thank you. All right, so before we dive in, I always like to start with setting the table and framing the conversation. So I want to share a little bit of background for you all about the Taxpayer Opportunity Network. With nearly 8,000 members, the Taxpayer Opportunity Network is Prosperity Now's national network that connects VITA programs and the resources they need to help low-income workers get ahead of a system that's often designed to leave them behind. VITA sites were not excluded from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in 2020, due to the lockdowns across the country, VITA sites had to shut their doors in the middle of the tax season and prepare to reopen virtually ahead of the July 15th deadline. That virtual work had to continue into this year. It was imperative that VITA sites implemented alternative tax preparation services, recruit volunteers for virtual work, and work across coalitions and communities to serve taxpayers. The use of the tax administration system to disperse economic stimulus payments made this work even more important. It also presented a new challenge, especially in underserved communities where the digital divide may have prevented taxpayers from accessing VITA services or non-filers from accessing stimulus payments. Prosperity Now, with the generous support from the Rockefeller Foundation, launched the Ensuring and Expanding Access to Tax Preparation Services in Underserved Communities project in the fall, with the goal of ensuring that economically vulnerable households in 6 of the nation's most vulnerable communities could access high-quality tax prep services for free, claim the EITC and other tax credits, and access ancillary supports and resources to improve their household financial health during this public and economic crisis. We partnered with a number of organizations, including Capital Area United Way from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, United Way of Southern Cameron County in Brownsville, Texas, United Way of the Ouachitas in Hot Springs, Arkansas, United Way of Central Georgia in Macon, United Way of Greenville County in Greenville, South Carolina, and United Way of the Low Country in Beaufort, South Carolina. Our cohort members participated in one-on-one technical assistance to support their efforts, as well as a series of peer calls that allowed them to learn from each other as well as other experts in the field. In this Fireside Chat series, you've heard directly from a few of our cohort members who shared their efforts to implement alternative services and volunteer management over the last few months in this new virtual world. Today, we will hear from our partner, Teresa Jackson, about coalition building. So now let's dive into the conversation, and I want to introduce to you all and welcome once again Teresa Jackson, the program coordinator for Low Country Area VITA Coalition. Hi again, Teresa, and welcome. It is great to have you here with us today.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
So as we dive into this, I always like to find out the before and after picture. So if you would please paint a picture for us of what your coalition engagement and advocacy work looked like prior to the pandemic, or what's in a normal year, if that such a thing exists?
Well, it is pretty fascinating because in Beaufort County specifically, our coalition currently consists of Beaufort County Council, Beaufort County government, obviously the United Way of the Low Country, the Human Service Alliance, and all of our partner organizations that support us. So we're kind of in a unique position in the sense that prior to even the Low Country Area VITA Coalition forming, our community came together, and we were charged by these community leaders to say, hey, how do we get all of these important human service providers together? And that in and of itself, back in 1999, created the Human Services Alliance. And at this point, we have 120 members. And through that, we have 17 different coalitions, where the Low Country Area VITA Coalition just happens to be one of them. And so it is unique in the sense, and this collective is called the Together for Beaufort Initiative, where we are addressing health, economy, social well-being, education, and off the top of my head, I don't remember the other one, but each of these coalitions are charged with having an impact and reporting that information back to the community at large, because we really want to be able to learn from each other, be able to I can go, for instance, to the Coalition on Aging in Place, and I can begin to talk to them about what and how important it is for VITA. And one of the IRS's priority areas happens to be the elderly. And so how do we collectively work together? How do we collaborate? How do we bring our resources together? And that's just one example of how our coalition has worked in the past.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So that's a wonderful picture of really a much larger than a VITA coalition, but really a community-wide effort to actually advance the cause. So now I'm curious because, and I think we spoke earlier, I'm here working from my basement. So with the onset of COVID-19, things really changed. And so I'm interested to hear what happened with your coalition work, with the onset of COVID-19, and how did you pivot your coalition engagement and the level of involvement in order to be able to continue in your advocacy and your work?
Well, one of the most important things I have to mention is the quality of our partners within the coalition, and as well as the other coalitions that we sort of intermingle with and support. I know this probably sounds crazy to most people, but it was almost like we didn't skip a beat. It was roll your shirt sleeves up. How are we going to figure this out? And part of our coalition too happens to be some of the volunteers that I recruited back in 2009 when I ran this program from 2009 to 2013, and then I was recruited back to take this over again in 2018. And so it's been where, as I say again, we really didn't skip a beat other than, okay, so what are we going to do with this? How are we going to figure this out? And there was so much unknown back then. And what I can proudly say is that within the IRS SPEC, the SPEC territories, we were the only coalition, the only VITA program under her direction that continued services when things shut down. And I found it such a great opportunity, especially to work with the Coalition of Aging in Place and working with the elderly population specifically. But there was a challenge, right? Because we had to figure out new systems, new ways to deliver services. And it was sort of like spit and bubble gum, but I was determined to ensure that we were going to reach whoever we could reach especially knowing that so many people were going to go unserved. I'll tell you, Rebecca, I was literally, I know this sounds insane, but every day, hundreds of phone calls from people that they were terrified. They didn't know what to do. And there was also that moment in time where we didn't know whether or not the tax deadline was going to be extended, which of course ended up happening into July, which was so helpful. But as you can imagine, these are people, when you say the IRS and taxes, right? Death and taxes, it's the two of the scariest things to people. So they were terrified. And for us to be able to provide a light, just even answering the phone or returning a phone call, the gratitude. And I was able to employ many of my coalition partners to step into that position and say, hey, may I forward this to you, because I'm, just one person as the program coordinator. And so I deployed all of my resources. And that's where a coalition really makes the difference. And that's what I'm talking about, the rolling up the shirt sleeves.
Sounds great. Many hands make light work.
Yes.
So I often say that to my children as I'm encouraging to do something, and they remind me that my hands are not participating as well. So other hands. So you mentioned earlier about having to recalibrate and take a look at
Yes.
some systems and processes and make some adjustments in order to be able to continue to serve. And I'm wondering if there were any tools or resources or messages that were really key in helping you to make that shift in those transitions. Was it anything from your organization, from the IRS, from TON, from your partners that really kind of helped and served, I would say, almost like as that critical hinge that helped you to turn?
What I can say is that in the year 2020, I think we were just all in shock that this was even really happening. And so once we got over the shock, it was like, okay, what can we do to make this work? And through a process of trial and error, we figured, yeah, that did not work. Or wow, that worked out really, really well. And we were able to go into 2021 with having, for lack of better words, piloted a couple of ways to meet the needs of people that we were serving. Because the reality was, going into 2021, we still didn't know what the landscape was going to be. I was having almost daily conversations with my partners and saying, are we going to be able to be in front of people, or how are we going to work? And then there was the training. We were, so privileged to also be selected as one of the Get Your Refund partners. And so there was training in that software. And so again, still a lot of trial and error, but we found that at the end of the day, we were able to serve. And this particular last tax year, well, 2021, I had half of the amount of volunteers, because the majority of my volunteers are considered to be at risk, and because they're older, they're retired. And so even though we had half of the volunteers, because we had the information and the technology available, we blew our goals, out of the water. And it's, I know, right? And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, as we move into this, into 2022, wow, that worked. And at first, a lot of the volunteers were, most people, it's like, if it's not broke, don't need to fix it. They were very comfortable, very satisfied. Same with our VITA clients. What do you mean? They were very scared, reluctant, and skeptical about these new ways of service delivery. But much as like it sort of has happened, a lot of people in the communities that we serve, they know a lot of people that know a lot of people, and then the word gets out. Oh, guess what? You have to wait and sit for 5 hours, where you can just go, drop it off, and they call you, and then you come back and you still get a printed copy of your, and like, wow, that worked really great. And so they are now, because of having gone through that and just the word of mouth, I think next year, potentially we could serve even more people, because if the rooms and the traditional sites are not filled up with people, then, and they're just doing, whether it's drop off or online or virtual or whatever methods are we will deploy next year, it just really opens up. But I'll tell you, the coalition, the people, the partners that we have been essential. And anyway, I'll just leave it at that. So
Awesome, awesome. And I'm going to circle back to that point again, because I'm hearing some reoccurring themes about persistence and determination, and really partnerships that really made the filing
yes,
season a success. I always
correct.
ask the what not to do. For the benefit of our partners, our VITA partners who are on the line and watching today, who may not have tread the waters that you have already passed through. And so I always like to ask you, like, if there was like a kerfuffle, if there was a mistake or something, a lesson that you learned, like this doesn't work, or don't do that next year, if you would mind sharing, so that others can learn from the benefit of your experience, that would be great. And anything else that you learned that you'll definitely look to carry into the future.
I believe that every event in our life is a gift. And sometimes those gifts are not wrapped in pretty packages. So I've never been afraid of making a mistake. I've never been afraid of going out there and asking, right? And I think that it's the thinking that as a VITA program that you can do it all on your own. And that's not the case. It is through the partnerships, it is through the coalition members, it is through, and these are human beings. And at the end of the day, when you ask for help or you ask for advice, it's amazing that you'll actually get it. And so I would say that if you are concerned about approaching a person or an organization, what's the worst thing that they would say is like, hey, we're not interested. But I will tell you, based on experience, it's like, hey, think about this, as a person, if somebody comes to me and asks my professional counsel, well, oh, thank you so much, right? And we want to be able to provide that assistance. And, if what I could say to people or VITA programs out there who do not have a coalition or are beginning to put a coalition together is that think about who you have just a strong relationship with. And even if you don't, but it seems that it's an opportunity to marry, right? Case in point is, and I keep referring back to the coalition on aging in place, but I have my little notes. I want to look at a couple of other coalitions, but in addition to that, like I worked with the Partners for Adult Literacy, right? And that was an opportunity to bring financial literacy, the importance of why you need to have a bank account, why this makes sense, and then bringing in the for-profit partners, such as a Synovus Bank or I don't think consumer credit counseling is a for-profit, but again, bringing and aligning all of those players together, because a lot of times we're serving the same sort of people. The Low Country Housing Coalition, right? Just these sorts of things, and I realize that we are so benefited from the fact that there are these other coalitions that are already in place, and but if you're starting one, all I can say it's about human beings at the end of the day. Talk to somebody, ask questions, ask for their counsel, and before you know it, you've invited 3 people to sit in the room with you, and you just think a little outside the box and say, Because most people, as we know, what's in it for me, right? I run an agency, I run an organization. How are you wasting my time? Well, how about we set up a specialized tax day where your clients that you serve will come to you. And all of a sudden they're like, well, can we just have a site here? And that's how it happens. So,
Right. So I do want to ask a question before we move into our Q&A portion.
sure.
And it's around, let's see, we're the end of June, on the cusp of July. Not a lot's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, but this is was always the time of year where as I was running a VITA program, I would be brainstorming or would have been brainstorming during the filing season, like identifying potential partners.
Yep.
So I'm wondering what does it look like when we talk about engaging with your coalition members, engaging new partners over the course of the next few months? I'm going to say until, in September, that's when I would really try to get all of my partner meetings in, at least out. But I'm curious to what that looks like for you, and if there's any advice that you have for our VITA partners as we head into some downtime, maybe, and really into that planning time for the next filing season. What advice would you provide around like engaging new partners, strengthening your coalition?
This is, I as much as I have not loved having to, because the IRS has really changed how every year how we apply and how the dollars are awarded. And this last time, we were awarded a 3-year grant, but you have to still submit a new grant over the 3 years, where previously it was like, here you go, here's 2 years, and then you report at the end. So it was sort of an exercise in revisiting the things that I addressed before the whole well, it was right after COVID, right? But and the thoughts I had coming into this year, which we were not able to materialize for many different reasons, but being able to kind of go back and revisit some of those things, and all of the things that I had been hopeful in doing is engaging, because for me, I completely shifted our priority areas and identified the Hispanic Latino community, and then also the elderly population and how to continue to grow that. And so all of a sudden, okay, I'm identifying all of the potential partners, and this is the exact time you do it. From June, July, August, you're going out there, you're engaging these new partners, you're figuring out some sort of, and I believe about grassroots marketing. I believe the boots on the ground is truly the best way to reach the populations of people. Anybody can run an ad, anybody can put something on Facebook or whichever. But when you consistently show up in a community and they know you and you don't go away, that consistency pays off. And so, I want to, and this is just how I approach our particular program. I'm the person, I'm out there, I'm talking to as many people as possible. And I'm just, I kind of joke about it. I'm just dumb enough to keep showing up, because, eventually they're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, she actually means what she says. And she does what she says she's going to do. And if she doesn't do it, she at least shows up and tells us why. And so this is that time where you begin that sort of trickle effect, and you begin to go out there and you show up at whatever opportunities that you can show up with, and you meet people. And so this is the perfect time to do that.
That's that time of year.
Yes, it is.
Right. So I do have another question that we want to share, get your feedback on. And it's one of the things that we've learned is that you don't have to wait until next season to make big changes. And I know I've always said, like, VITA is a big ship. It is hard to turn it once it gets out in the water, but sometimes you absolutely have to. So what is one big change that you actually had to make during the filing season? I mean, and this is like building the plane while we're flying.
So Can I have a lifeboat, please? I will tell you, this 2021, going into it, I'm like, oh, I've got all my ducks in a row. This is going to work. It's fabulous. And then it's like, oh, what do you mean that doesn't work? What do you mean that my volunteers don't like it to do it this way? What do you mean that our clients are skeptical and they think it's a scam, and why are we doing things differently? And so it all comes back down to education and being available. And where I would, again, I'm very hands-on, and I have 12 sites. I support 7 different counties, but my job is to ensure that the community is educated and they feel safe, and that no, it's not a scam. And I'll be there, and this is my 3rd time saying it. I roll up my shirt sleeves because I want my volunteers to know that I'm there. I want the community to know that I'm there. And so the technology, I'll be honest, it was a challenge. It was really a challenge this year. And that is why I'm so grateful for having been one of the selected participants with the Rockefeller Foundation, because it was key in order for me to be able to, I didn't think about that, to be able to go back and say, and it was really it was a critical piece in our success. Again, because I said earlier, we blew our goals out of the water. Half of the volunteers, and if it had not been for the technology piece, we wouldn't have done that. We would have not accomplished what we were able to do. And that also includes, just sort of a side note, that we were able to help recover almost $800,000 in stimulus money that would have not gone claimed. So that's huge.
That is huge. Yay. And we are so excited for your success this filing season,
Thanks, Rebecca.
Success in the years to come. If we can move to the next slide, I don't know. I know we had maybe another question. I'm going to give folks about another 30 seconds if they have a question to pop into the chat that we might be able to get to. But again, while we're fielding and seeing if there are any other questions, I do want to say again that it is really great to have you as a part of the Rockefeller Foundation Ensuring and Expanding Access cohort.
Yes.
It's a really long title, but we are certainly
but we have accomplished that, haven't we?
I believe mission accomplished, definitely in the Low Country area. Awesome. So if we have no other questions at this time, I want to say thank you again so much for joining with us today, Teresa. If we can go on to our final thoughts and our next steps. It has really been great to have you with us, and to have you all here participating with us throughout this series of fireside chats. I really hope that you were able to get some good information out of it and to learn from your peers. If nothing more than once again the reassurance that we're not in this boat alone. That we all have been in the same waters over the last couple of years, and so there is always help if you need it. I would encourage everyone.
Well, and one thing too, and one thing too, Rebecca, I want to say, and offer this up, to anybody who's listening or who might potentially listen to this at a later date, that feel free to email me at lowcountryvitacoalition at gmail.com. Again, that's lowcountryvitacoalition@gmail.com. Because after the fact, people might have, I didn't think about that, or they watch this and maybe they show it to one of their colleagues and a question comes up. I want people to be able to reach out and feel free to do so.
Thank you so much for that. We greatly appreciate it, and definitely what we encourage for our partners, all of you. So as we wrap up in our last 30 seconds or so, I want to encourage you to visit our advocacy center, although the links are not clickable at the moment, and complete the survey, which you will receive shortly after the closing of this webinar. And of course, please, if you're not already a member, and I see a lot of names here and a lot of folks that I know are members of the Tax Round Tax Roundtable listserv. Let me encourage you to join that listserv, and so you can continue the conversation with your peers from across the country on a regular basis, and ask your questions and get feedback and insights from your colleagues as well. And finally, thank you again so much, Teresa, for joining us today. And thank you all for participating and logging on and joining with us as well. And we hope to see you again soon. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Take care.